It's the 14th of January, 2011. I have to get used to saying that. 2011 or 2011. We're at Eddie Bayshard's place on Lake Champlain, Coopersville. Beautiful vista here. Ice fishermen out there pulling them in, and I'm glad I'm in here and they're out there. When I started today, I knew this was going to be a wonderful show about an old schoolhouse and how it's finally coming back home. We're pretty close to coming back home. And I thought we maybe would do the whole show outside. So my wonderful long-suffering wife, and she hates that word, laid out all these layers of clothes that I have on now. So if halfway through our program you see beads of sweat, it's not because I'm frustrated or frightened, it's because it's warm. But it's beautiful and toasty inside the Bayshard home. And we've got Shan Moore. Everybody knows who Shan Moore is. Hi, Shan.
Hi, Gordy.
We're delighted to have you here today. Why did you get interested in this schoolhouse?
District 9 schoolhouse stood on Mason Road, past the church. It was Lord Road then, I think. And Eddie Bayshard was a student there. I was writing a history of the church in Coopersville, St. Joseph's, and I found that the story wasn't just about the church, it was about the whole community. And Eddie told me stories about the schoolhouse. He has some great anecdotes about adventures he had there. And eventually, Celine Paquette approached us to say that she now owned this schoolhouse. It had been moved in the early 40s to the lakeshore and was turned into a camp, and Celine had no use for it, and she offered to donate it if we could raise the money to bring it home. And Eddie agreed to fund the project. So I guess it was just, I'm interested because Eddie's stories are so fascinating. That's all there is to it. So we've done a little history research, and we found that this schoolhouse, there was a school on this spot in Coopersville at least as far back as 1869, but the common school system was established in New York State in 1795. So there were a lot of one-room schools popping up all over the state. By 1819, there were 6,000 school districts, and when you talk school district then, you would talk a little area that belonged to a one-room school, not like today where everything's consolidated into big districts. So in Champlain, there were 16 districts in 1879, according to the History of Clinton and Franklin Counties by Hurd. There were 29 teachers, 8 were men, 21 were women. There were 1,205 kids ages 5 through 21 registered for school. The average daily attendance was 582. So there were a lot of kids not going to school. The value of schoolhouses and their land in Champlain that year was $17,650, which today, just moving the schoolhouse was a pricey proposition. So it costs a lot more these days. So anyhow, the school closed in 1931, and when District 9 was consolidated with a school in Champlain. But Eddie Bayshard was in 2nd grade then, and you should talk to him to get the whole story on what the schoolhouse was like and what it was like to go to that school.
We're going to do that. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Eddie, it's so great to meet you.
Yes.
I love your spot on Lake Champlain. How long have you lived here?
Oh, about 25 years. 25 years in this house right here. I bought that house when I got done. Sold my business at Rouse's Point, and a few other business, coal business, grain business. I sold them, and bought this house and moved here from Rouse's Point.
So you moved and the schoolhouse moved.
You know, the schoolhouse had moved before that, I think.
Yeah, I think so, a little before that. Now, tell me a little bit about your earliest memories. You went to the schoolhouse only for 2 or 3 grades?
Two grades.
Two grades.
First and second grade. when I first went to the schoolhouse, Mrs. Forger was the school teacher, and well, there was quite a few kids. They were building the overpass in Coopersville that goes over the railroad track, and the Penoyers they were building the overpass, and they came there with the whole families, and they were sending their kids to school, and which made more kids in the school, and us kids, and they built the overpass, and for 2 years, and when the school closed, the overpass was done. So they moved back to Pennsylvania, and they didn't go to school in Champlain, but the rest of the kids that went to school in Coopersville went to school in Champlain, all of them. With a school bus, that was a car. Mr. Forger had the contract for 2 years to bring the kids to school with a car, with a 3-seater car. Then my uncle Alphonse bought a brand new school bus, and he got the job to drive the kids to school, and he did that the rest of his life. When I don't know how many years it was, but he retired from that.
Isn't that amazing? Let me go back. You told me before the camera came on that when you started school, you didn't speak one word of English.
No, I couldn't speak a word of English, and I couldn't understand a word of English either. So it was very hard for me, and I had an awful time in school. Plus, at home, my sisters wouldn't help me. My father wouldn't help me. My mother couldn't help me because she couldn't speak English. And she thought if I learned to speak English, I wouldn't be able to speak to her in French anymore, so she didn't want to teach me.
But you had 2 older sisters.
That could speak English, but she told my 2 sisters, don't you teach him. He'll learn fast enough. which wasn't fast enough for me because I couldn't learn if nobody teach me.
You know, going to school as a little boy is tough enough. The first few days of school was traumatic for me, and because I wasn't the best little kid, traumatic for my teachers. But it had to be double trouble for you because you couldn't even speak the language.
It was terrible. It was more than double. It was terrible at school for me. If nobody tried to teach you, and the teacher, she got other kids, she can't fool around with me. She just give me the book and here. That was it. I mean, she had 8 grades to teach. She can't fool around all day with one person. So it was terrible for me. I wouldn't want to go through that again for anything. But I went through it, and I did good. I did good. I did a lot better than other people did. I look around, I can see that.
Oh, this guy is so great. I had to move a little closer. You're a good storyteller, I can tell right off the bat. Did you yourself walk to school?
I walked to school, and especially in the wintertime. It was very cold. They had them little rubber boots I used to wear, and I had wool socks inside. But by the time I got to school, my feet were froze. And I had a scarf around my head, and just my 2 eyes sticking out.
Don't you wish we had a few pictures?
My face wouldn't freeze. And my 2 sisters used to go to school ahead of time because they had the job to make the fire in the school. They had to go there ahead of time to make sure there'd be some heat in the school. Well, a lot of days you had to sit around the stove and until noon with your coats on because it was too cold in the school. And around noon it was warm enough you take your coat off. And that's how it went. And that school teacher used to come to school with her husband used to bring her with a car. But all of us kids used to come with on foot, except for Kenneth Lord. He used to come to school with a horse, horseback. And when you get to school, you turn the horse around and hit the horse and let her go.
Go back home?
You go back home by itself. And the horse would stop at the neighbor's house and probably and the neighbors screw him on until you got back home. He lived kind of ways.
That's a beautiful story. Can you picture that today?
Yeah.
Huh?
And one day,
I've heard of dogs going to school and going back home, but never a horse.
yeah, a horse. And one day, the kids wanted to ride the horse. My sister and Ina Forger got on the horseback, and they were riding it around school. And some of the kids picked up some little stones and they threw it at the horse. And the horse started galloping. My sister fell off the horse.
Oh, my.
And the teacher told the kid, said, don't bring that horse to school anymore. I don't want to see that horse around the school. So he didn't come back to it.
That was the end of the horse and the round. Huh?
No more horse at school.
Now, there's a story about your dad. Was he on the school board?
Yeah, he was the, what do you call it?
Trustee?
Yeah, he was
A trustee?
yeah. The head one of the school, because he had told the people, he said, if you elect me for that job, I'm going to close the school and send all the kids to the school in Champlain, because they had a high school there, and the kids are getting old. And after once they get 8th grade, that was the end of the school. They didn't more school, and so then you can go to school and graduate from the Champlain High School. So that's why he got elected. But when my uncle Alphonse got the job for the school bus, yeah, he couldn't be at that anymore, because you couldn't have a relative, you couldn't hire a relative to drive the school bus.
A little nepotism there. Huh?
Yeah, so he quit. And then I think it was Mr. Lord got the job, was elected the job, and he took over and ran it.
So the school, you were just a little kid, 9 or 10, when the school closed. 9?
Yeah, I was 2nd grade. Yeah.
So when did the school move? What happened to it after they shut it down?
Well, it was shut down for quite a few years, because you never know. Maybe so someday that you never had to come back. Then they decided to centralize.
Centralize the schools, how I remember.
Centralize the school, and they did the whole the district. So they did. There was other schools the same way that we were. They were going to school at the Champlain too. There were other little schoolhouses, and they centralized. After they centralized, they said, well, now we don't need a school no more, because we're centralized. We didn't. In other words, we're going to always be going to school at Champlain now. So they made an auction, and then when the auction came, they said, you got to move the schoolhouse off the property, because the schoolhouse, the land doesn't belong to the school. It belongs to the farmer. The farmer just donated a piece of land to put the school on, but was never any papers made that they give you the land. So you got to take the school off the land. So that's how it was sold. Mr. Paquette wanted a camp, and he said, well, that will make me a good camp. So he bought it. He moved the schoolhouse off the property and brought it down to the Sheezy Landing Road and put it up and made himself a camp. And there was no more school there.
That was early 40s.
Yeah.
That was early 40s.
Yeah.
Now I want to go back a chapter. You were telling me earlier about a little bit of surplus money, and they needed to do something with that money or they'd lose it. What was that story all about?
Well, when my father was a trustee of the school, he had, at the end of the year, there was money left over that he didn't spend. You know, he had left over. So he told Dr. Allen, he said, I got money left over. He said, it'll be for next year. Oh no, he said, you got to spend it. He said, if you don't spend it, he said, next year they're going to reduce your income. They won't tax the people so much. He said, you got to spend it. I thought, yeah, okay, I'll spend it. So he built a cement step in front of the school, the whole front end of the school, a cement step. And the chimney wasn't very good, and it was just a chimney on top of the school. He took the chimney down and he built a chimney from the floor way up to the top, up. And with that, he told Dr. Allen, said the money's all gone. He said, I spent it all. Well, he said, that's it. He said, no, you next year your taxes are going to be the same.
So here we are, all these years later, and you were very, very much instrumental in helping to get that schoolhouse back from the Lake Shore, Celine Paquette's, back to Coopersville, not to its original location, but where the heck is it now?
Well, it's on the end of Bayshore Road in Coopersville, and on a piece of land I donated, and that's where it's going to. The foundation is already in, and the school is about ready to be put on the foundation, and that's where it's going to be. It's a good spot for it. It's in the same district, number 9, that it was in, only a little farther down from where it used to be, because the land that didn't belong to the school, you can't put it back where it was.
I got to ask you, all these years later, and your memories of going to school there are still pretty powerful. I can feel that when you're talking about not being able to speak English. How does it make you feel to be a part of this whole project and get the schoolhouse back home again?
I feel good because that's why I did it, because I felt as if it belonged here. You know, because Mrs. Paquette told us and said, if you don't take it, I'm either going to tear it down or I'm going to burn it down. So I said, okay, well, we'll move it. So,
Can I throw something in
Well,
here?
of course, I'll bring the microphone right back to you, Shan.
Mrs. Paquette offered this to us several years ago. And this project got a very late start because we just didn't have time to work on it. And so she was so patient. She let that school, the camp, sit there for, I think, 7 years before things actually got started. We began our real effort last January, and the schoolhouse moved on November 16th. So she also was great about letting us on the property. We, not me, some people who do the real work, had to cut some hedges down and do a lot of work around the schoolhouse to get it jacked up. So we can't thank her enough for being patient and letting this happen, and for Ed being willing to do this all this time, and his wife Bev. So back to you, Gordy.
Back to you. It's a funny thing because today we're doing this on the 14th of January. And I don't know how many people in this room are aware of it, but 60 years ago, a young communications expert by the name of Dave Garraway started a program on television called The Today Show, not having any clue that it would still be going all these years. And so here we are, the 60th anniversary of the Today Show, with our own little Today Show on the 14th of January at Eddie Bayshard's place here. Eddie, what other memories do you have of your childhood growing up around here that might tie us in with the school?
well, like what? I live in Coopersville.
Tell him where, Eddie. Tell him where your house was.
Yeah, where did you live?
I live on Bayshard Road. It was
Nice to have a road named after you, huh, Dennis?
well,
There's a few roads named after it.
they named that when the town of Champlain started naming all the roads. A lot of roads didn't have no names. Like the Bayshore Road, I don't think it had a name before, because my father lived there for quite a few years. Yeah, I think he was the first one to live there. Then it was Charlie Bayshard, and then it was Alphonse Bayshard lived on that road. And, so that's how come they named it. They named
What else could they do? They had to name it. Can you imagine 911 trying to deal with that back in those days?
That's right. Yeah.
Father's name on record here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was your dad? What was his name?
Aldrich Bayshore.
And your mother.
My father was a hay dealer. He used to buy hay and ship it all down south. There was, and he made good with that, but because the farm. My father told me, he said the farm. You can't make money with a farm. He said you make money with it. We used to buy hay, and we had sometimes a whole complete train load of hay going down, all one shot, going down south.
On the trains.
On a train. A railroad train.
No
Railroad
kidding.
boxcar.
Wow.
A whole train load of boxcars full of hay.
Do you remember that?
Well, yes, I worked there.
Well, how would you load the boxcars?
Well, the trucks in Canada, sometimes there were trucks. Well, it was a special year. It was more than 1 year, about 4 or 5 years in a row. That the South, like North Carolina, South Carolina, didn't have no rain, and the hay down there they didn't grow. So the government would pay the freight on the hay that was shipped from here to down there to help out the farmers down there, especially the colored people. They had mules, and they had stockyards where you can go and rent a mule. A lot of farmers didn't have no horses or mules. They just go and rent one and do their plant thing, then they bring it back. So much for the time the mule that was used. And the stockyards, they needed the hay to feed the mules. So my father was load up the train from Canada. All the hay came down from Canada. And Sundays, the trucks were lined up from the Canadian custom to the American custom, waiting to come in to be inspected, and then they had a government inspector that was there. They would look at the hay, and if it's good hay, you put a stamp on it, and when the hay was shipped down south, they couldn't refuse it. You had to pay it. There was no if or end. You give a stamp by the government, and you had to take it.
Eddie, was it bales?
Well, it was all bales. There was the bales were big bales, 150 pounds to 130 pounds. A bale, the big bales.
So what years are we talking about here now?
I must have been around. 18 years old when that happened.
So it was in the 40s, because, they didn't start baling hay until the 40s for the most part.
Yeah, that's right.
The farm I worked on didn't start baling hay until the 50s.
Baling the field, because these were stationary press. You used to put your hay in the barn all loose. Then the stationary press would go there, and they would run the tractor would run the press, and they'd put the hay in the press and press it at the same time. That's how
this is a story that I've never heard before. I didn't know we shipped.
It was a big deal.
I didn't know we shipped trainloads and trainloads of hay down south.
All the railroads, there was a thing, 3 or 4 railroads in Rouse's Point had sidings that were loaded with empty cars, and the trucks would come and place their hay in their cars, and when they were all filled up, off they go. Down south.
That's a great story. Shan has just slid a beautiful picture here of Mr. Eddie. Mr. Ed!
Yeah,
look at this photograph.
And that's my brother on the other side.
And the company...
Sitting down. Ed is the one seated,
Oh, yeah.
and his brother's Donia.
No.
What's the brother's name?
Donia. D-O-N-I-A. Donia.
Story, Eddie.
They used to call him Don. Don.
Well, of course, I would too. I don't think I ever heard that name. Is that a French name?
Yeah. But my brother always hated that name.
Those were fighting words, huh?
He used to say to my mother, "What do you give me that name for?" My mother would say to him, "It's not me who give me that name, it's your father."
A lot of family harmony back in those days, huh?
Didn't tell the rest. And Eddie, tell about how your brother's name wasn't on the birth certificate.
Oh, your brother's name wasn't on the birth certificate?
Oh, no, that's right. Yeah. But my brother went to I went with him too. I went to my birth certificate for something. I guess I was going in the army or something like that. I forgot what it was. Something in that neighborhood. And we went to the county clerk's office to get a birth certificate. So I got mine. And we got to Don. He didn't have no name. He just had the name the date he was born. Just the date he was born, but no name.
You gotta be kidding me.
Yeah. So my father says to Don, "Yeah, now it's your chance. Name yourself Joe, Pete, Frank, or anything you want.
Anything but Sue, right? How do you do?
You've been asking me all these years about that name. You can change it the way you want now."
There you go.
So
But now you start thinking like that. Well, after he said, "I'll give you back my old name," he said, "What doing it?"
you know that's a good point, because those birth certificates were almost never right back in those days. People had their names reversed, their middle name, their last name, their first name. They'd get to church and the priest would change their name because he didn't like their English name. Then they'd get to school and the teacher would say, "That's too hard for me to pronounce. You're George." And so the rest of their life they'd be known as George. If that ever happened today, we'd all be in jail and we'd have to try to unravel all this stuff.
The same thing when I went to school. There was another, my name was Edward, but when I went to school, there was another kid by the name of Edward. So the teacher said, "Oh, we'll call you Eddie."
So you were Eddie.
Yeah, after that was Eddie.
Well, that's a good nickname. That's a good nickname. But sometimes the names were...
The name of Edward, because she called out Edward, and us two kids would stand up.
And that happened very often.
Ed, you told me a story once about those Penoye brothers. They were pretty mischievous.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the ones that came here and then moved out of town when the project was done, huh?
Yeah. The Penoye boys, they were okay.
Yeah, we talked about them earlier.
Not on this tape.
Oh, not on this tape. We should tell people that we had, rather than a wardrobe malfunction, which is often the case with me, we had a camera malfunction. So we started all over again. But talk about that family.
The Penoye boys, they were older boys. I was only a young kid, but them they were tall, big boys, you know. And one day we were outdoors, and it was during noon hour, and they were speaking to each other's ears, so we couldn't understand what they were saying. So, and I knew that there was some mischiefs going to go on, but I didn't know what it was. And all at once, the back of the school, there was two back houses, one for the boys and one for the girls. And
When we say back house, we mean
the
outdoor facility.
Bathroom.
The privy, sure.
A bathroom. And the boys would go on the right-hand side of the school, and the girls on the left-hand side of the school. And all at once, a girl came out on the left-hand side, and she went in her back house. We call it back house. It was a bathroom. And Bernard said to his brother, "Go ahead." So he crawls underneath the fence of the fence, and he goes behind the girl's back house. They had chiseled a hole in the back with a jackknife. They chiseled a hole in the back end of the bathroom. The hangout. He had brought it with him with a piece of hay, stiff of hay about 2 feet long, And he put that in the hole, he gets it a shove right there.
Can you hear the squeal now? Can you hear it all these years later? I can hear
They're
it.
yelling.
Well, when that happened, I thought that the door was going to smash open. Gore ran out of the back out as fast as he could. He ran right into the school in the front, in the school. Then the teacher came out. So, who did that? Nobody was talking. Nobody was talking. So she goes back into the school and she comes back out again with a hammer and a piece of board and a couple nails. She gave that to one of the biggest boys there. Go nail that across that hole there. She said, if I catch anybody behind the girl's back house again, they're going to expel from the school. Going to be expelled, and no questions asked. So nobody ever went back there again. That was the end of that.
The end of that. Well, this family, as you mentioned, and I forgot, it might have been on another tape. This family came to town for a purpose. They came here to help work on the overpass.
They built the overpass from scratch.
Now, which overpass? The one?
Over the railroad tracks in Coopersville.
Yeah.
That's the whole family came. There was they were big boys and the father, and he had hired men and his machines with tractors and trucks, but it wasn't like big machines like they had today. It was small stuff, you know. He was down in Pennsylvania. He used to work in the coal business, coal mines, and he had the machinery to do it. And so he brought all the machines up, and he did it. It took him 2 years to do it, but he did it. And he bought the land from next to the overpass, like over the Mr. Forger's. He bought the south, that was the north side of the overpass. He took all the dirt there, and on the south side he took it right next to the overpass, but on the other side of the railroad track, where it is, you can see that right now where the big hole, like a dentation in the land, where he took all the dirt out and then built the overpass with.
Eddie, I think, was someone killed working on that overpass when that work was done?
No, it was somebody killed when the train went in the river.
Oh, yes, yep.
Whoa, train in the river?
Yeah.
Read my book, Gordy.
Uh-huh.
Read my book, you know all
I'll
this
first
stuff.
read your lips, and then I'll read your book.
Yeah. When my father, I asked my father, I said, how old are you when the train ran into the river? He said, I was about 21 years old. My father told me that. He said that what it was, there was a train in Rogers Point heading south, and the engineer and the fireman didn't want to get on. He said the engineer is drunk. He said,
Engineer's drunk?
the engineer is drunk.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, he didn't want to get on. He said, I ain't going to get on there. The engineer is drunk. Oh, nothing's going to happen. Get on. Oh, why? He said, why? We need somebody to fire the train. In them days, they used to fire it by hand.
Coal.
So he got off.
So the swing bridge was open.
And in Coopersville, the river, barges used to come up the river, and the barge used to blow their horn, the foghorn light. Yeah, and the guy that was running in the railroad station used to go out and open the bridge.
1903.
They opened the bridge.
Swing bridge.
A swing bridge. Yeah, it was swing bridge, and the bridge, and they opened the bridge up, and the barges would go by, and then they closed the bridge back up again. So it happened that day that the barges went by, and then the guy didn't have time to close the bridge yet, and the flags were down and everything for the train to stop, but the train never stopped. It goes right over and when it gets to the bridge, pretty near to the bridge, the section men that were working on the railroad track, when he said they're not going to stop, he grabbed hold of a handful of cinders and he threw at the engine where the engineer was sitting in the seat there at the window there. He threw that hand up there. I guess the engineer then looked and he saw the bridge was open. It was too late to stop. He just jumps out of the engine, but never tells the fireman.
Now here's a picture. Here's a picture of when they were pulling the train out of the Great Chazy River after this incident occurred.
Yeah.
1903. And your dad,
So
the fireman drowned.
So the firemen didn't know about it because the engineer didn't tell them. And the engine plunged right into the river and killed the firemen. Then all the cars were falling in, and most of the cars are loaded with livestock.
Yeah.
And some cars would bust open, and the cows would swim out. and
Some cows didn't make it though.
no,
yeah, of course
they drowned in the river.
Sure.
So I think it was only 2 more cars, and the caboose would have went in. And the guys in the caboose didn't know about it either. So
Maybe they were drunk too. Who knows? No, my goodness. Can you imagine what? Boy, I bet that turned the whole town on its ear for a while. That was.
So when the caboose came, there was a couple more cars. The river was too full; they couldn't take no more, so they stayed on the track. So the guy in the caboose goes south. What was going on? The other ones went in the river too. The river was
You
full.
thought we were going to talk about a one-room schoolhouse all day today.
Gordy, one of the things I want to bring out is, well, it was Corbeau then, right, Eddie? Not
Yeah.
Coopersville. Corbeau is crow in French.
Yeah.
And Corbeau was its own little community. There was a train station, there was a post office, there was a creamery, there were stores. What else, Eddie? The Catholic Church was here. The sawmill.
There was a lot of gas stations in days around, or because the main route was in 87 is going through now. It wasn't built, so all these small roads are full of cars. And people are going to Canada to have a drink of beer or whiskey or something because it was free over there. Full of cars. A road you couldn't go in there in a road.
We're talking early cars here in 1903.
Yeah.
That was quite an age, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Long
Yeah.
before Prohibition.
Yeah.
Well, that's another story.
It is. Eddie, tell about these bottles here.
These bottles, when we first got here and sat down, Calvin said, maybe we ought to move the bottles. And Shan said, no, those are very important bottles. What were they anyway?
They're ink bottles. These are ink bottles. They're clay link ink bottles.
Isn't that amazing?
From the school.
From the school itself,
with
each one has a little lip in it.
Yeah, you could. Well, the desk in school, there used to be little ink desks. Used to use that to fill them up.
And yet, but I'll bet you in the first couple of grades, they didn't let the little kids use ink.
No, it was mostly pencil.
Only a pencil. I
Yeah,
remember
pencil.
very well from my days, years later.
They had pencils with that kind of lead that if you weren't careful, it'd make holes right through your paper. they weren't that kind of lead today.
Different kind of lead?
No, today you got nice smooth writing pencils, but them days were rough as hell. You weren't careful, you make a hole right through your paper.
How did you sharpen your pencils? Can
They
you?
had a pencil sharpener. You
did?
like they got today there.
Well,
Put the pencil in and sharpen it up.
now they're battery operated. The one I got just goes brrrr.
A little crank on it. And so that's how it went. So
How did you get those, Eddie?
well, they weren't being used anymore. They were just thrown out to one side. So I picked them up.
And tell.
You know, that's the way life is up in Coopersville.
They weren't being used anymore. They weren't, because now the ink bottles are just small bottles. These are big bottles. I guess they needed a lot of ink.
You know, this is the very first time and I've been to museums all over the world. This is the first time I've ever seen ink bottles outside a museum. So this is a huge thrill for me. And when I first looked at them, I did not know that they were ink bottles.
Yeah.
That's
It's usually right on it somewhere where the ink bottles.
You think I can see that with these eyes?
One of them says ink.
Right here. Oh yeah, one of them says ink, and I can see that, right? Oh, I see that three letters. It must be ink. And what's the first word on there, Shan?
Eller's Ink.
Eller's ink.
That's
The beauty of the internet, we could Google that today and find out perhaps where these bottles were made.
Yeah.
And who knows, they might have been made right around here somewhere.
They could. Eddie also has some school desks
Yeah, I got school desks.
from our own school.
right.
So that's the start of our collection for the schoolhouse, which we've named the Coopersville Schoolhouse of History. And we're going to collect schoolhouse artifacts, and we're going to have a few shows a year. And the first one, I would think, will be how to move a schoolhouse. So
That's
it's
good. That's
it's
good.
gonna star
you
this
can
guy
say
over
that.
here. That's right. So I just want to mention the names of everybody in our committee before I forget.
Good.
We have Kathy Fozier here, who had family who attended the school.
Yep.
And we have Gloria Ashline,
Yep.
who also her father, and she had siblings who attended the school. And Jerry Favreau from Rouse's Point is also part of the committee. She's just really interested in history. So, but I think we should talk a little bit about how the school came home.
I think we ought to talk a lot about how the school came home, and we're going to take a little breather here, and we'll just follow that progress.
So we
You
went.
know, I've said it many times before. Sometimes the very best conversations occur when the off button is pressed on the camera. So you will not have a repeat of the story we just heard. Suffice to say that we're still busting a gut over how this guy and that wonderful, charming, beautiful young woman Beverly got together over there. You, maybe he'll write it in book form, or Shan will put it in the paper, who knows. Oh, this is wonderful. I want to get into the Town of Champlain book because we want to correct what may have been a small mistake about when Coopersville became Coopersville. And it was controversy because it was called Corbeau long after it was officially changed to Coopersville.
Right.
So on page 55, may I read a small paragraph under the heading Coopersville Post Office? A small article in the November 13th, 1841 issue of the Plattsburgh Republican says, and I quote, "A new post office has been established in the town of Champlain, in this county, at the place usually known by the name of Corbeau. It'll hereafter be called Coopersville, and all letters for that section of the town should be directed to Coopersville Post Office." Hopefully people will be able to see parts of this video, or have seen it already, on HometownCableNetwork.com, the moving of the schoolhouse, because it was no small project. It required official master's level engineers from all over the world to come here and make decisions. And this guy over here, Dennis Richard, or Richard. Dennis, how you doing?
Good, yourself?
I'm doing just fine and dandy. This, did you know what you were getting into when you raised your hand and said, "I'll try it"?
Well, I'll tell you, this is number 13, and to be honest with you, I just thought 13 would be like a lucky number, seeing that Eddie was involved, but it was the most challenging out of all of them.
Well, we watched the video, and I was cheering you. I mean, here we are way after the fact. It's like watching a movie of a ball game 50 years ago and not realizing who's going to win and cheering. But I'm when you first started coming out of the yard, and I knew the hedge had to go. I said, I don't know, Dennis.
The most important part about it was the schoolhouse itself. The roof rafters are all hand hewn.
Are they really?
Yep, and you don't want to, when you jack it, it's got to come up nice and even, because if you don't, you'll wrench something, and if you wrench something, well, you might as well call the fire department, because you wrench a house or you wrench something in the wrong way, it's done. The key to it is like when you move something like this, you got to make sure your doors open and shut, nice and even as you're jacking up the house, and the windows are square, and you take that route. But it was very challenging because of the way it was put there. It was put there with one row of blocks, and over the years, it settled, and there was a fireplace in there, and it was a lot of work. It was the most challenging out of all the houses that I've moved.
You've moved 13 houses?
This is number 13, and I think it's the last one.
How about the addition?
Well, when I looked at it, I first saw the video and I said, wait a minute, that addition on the back is not part of that original schoolhouse.
No.
But you decided to bring it with you anyway.
Well, Eddie wanted it for storage, so we
Oh, here we go.
whatever Eddie wants, we do.
Whatever Eddie wants. All
But
right.
the addition in the back was built contrary to the floor joists of the original,
Yeah.
and you have to get it to come together. And there wasn't whoever built the addition obviously didn't look at the old schoolhouse prior. They just added it the way they did, and the old schoolhouse part is in better condition than the addition, believe it or not.
This is quite when I think I heard Shan amidst all of her uh-ohs, and I don't know, and oh boy.
Because I
and
was
look at-
videotaping.
and she was videotaping. She said that the building, once you got it jacked, was 22 feet high, 21 feet high.
21 something.
21, that's hard to believe.
Yeah, most of them. The house I moved before that was 23, but we went across the road here from Mr. Bayshaw's property, right next door to Mr. Bayshaw's, just down the road. That was 23 by height. That was 28 by 56 or 58 long, if I'm not mistaken. But this one here, it's the way it was made. The way it was made and the ground conditions, it's next to the lake, the ground was always soft. The working conditions were tough on this one.
How do you go, just briefly describe how you go about getting that thing jacked up to where you wanted it?
Well, you have to get underneath and get the ground, so you got to find some spots where it's level and start sliding your beams underneath in 3 different dimensions. And you slide them under there and you start bringing it up a little bit at a time, make sure it's level. And as you go up, first thing you put a set of railroad blocks, some square blocking underneath your sides, and you keep going. It's just a time-consuming thing, and it can be aggravating.
How long did that part of it take?
Oh, I picked at it off and on because of that's not all I have to do there, but
I think we understand.
yeah, but I started back in I want to say March. Was it March, Jen?
March or April.
March or April, and the ground was we had like an open winter, but the ground next to the lake, we'd go in there with a piece of machinery and it's just you're gone, and that's no fun. You no more get close to something to get to where you want it to be, and you're lacking 6-8 inches and you can't do it. So we just waited till it dried up some, and we started picking at it. And then we've had one hell of a hot summer, and that's no fun to be. I picked at it in my spare time is what I did. And
Had to take the fireplace out.
yep.
Oh, you took it out. I meant to ask you that. Yes.
That's the first thing you do. You always take your like a chimney. You always take that down because that's how people get hurt. The fellow that took down the anchorage, that almost killed him when the chimney came down on top of the excavator. So it's just the chimney was and the foundation. Whoever put that in, they used the old style cement. So that was well put together, but again, you got 2 feet to work in, and you got to take this all out. It has to come out before you start moving anything. So that was it was quite a challenge.
So you finally got it on a flatbed, or?
No, we got it on I-beams. I have
I-beam.
Yeah, I have I-beams that are they're probably 40. Well, they're 55 feet long, and we slide once we get it where we belong. The house belongs. We just slide the I-beams underneath. You got to get them so they're like in thirds. So you divide the house so that if you put too much towards the center, the house will want to give, and if you put it too far on the outside, well, it puts pressure on the inside. But the reason for taking a lot of time with it is because of the hand-hewn roof rafters.
What did you guess just looking at it when it was built? Because we've been speculating as to when that building might have been built.
If you look at the boards inside, they're all the wide, you don't see that anymore.
12-inch?
12 and some. And what really, when you look at the rafters, you say to yourself, wow, it's, somebody took some serious time to get these things to fit the way they fit.
So it's almost guaranteed that it was 19th century sometime, perhaps as old as 1869, you think, Shan, maybe?
I thought you were going to say as old as me, Gordy.
No, I wasn't pointing at you, but
No idea. Don't know for sure, but
Yeah.
it's
It would
old.
have to be, I think, in the late 1800s.
yeah, because you don't have any records of a fire, of a school fire.
No,
So
doesn't mean they're
It
not
doesn't
there.
mean there wasn't one somewhere. And we don't have any minutes from the old, some of the old minutes survive of schoolhouses, and we've done interviews from those minutes, and they are absolutely beautiful. As to how much they paid for wood, as to how much they paid for the teacher.
I can say that if there had been a fire during Charles Hancock's day, he would have written about it.
Yeah.
Because he wrote about the train going into the
Oh, yeah.
river. He wrote about the steeple falling off the church. He wrote about every bit of weather that happened. So I'm assuming at least goes back to 1880. But then again, what if it just fell apart and they had to build a new one? You just don't know.
And who knows? So Dennis, what was the first challenge once you got underway?
Well, we had some cedar hedging.
You think I didn't notice that? It looked to me like about 6 feet of that cedar hedge was gone by the time you made the corner.
Well, you hate to disrupt, some people's property, but you have no choice. I mean, it's either that or try to go across the field, and the field was too wet, it's too swampy. So we had to actually.
I was worried when you got your tractor across the road that the driver's side driving wheels were going to be too far off the road to make the turn.
Well, it was pretty close there, but again, it's you got to start turning at one time and trying to keep the expenses down. And so we built an additional road next to the road.
We saw that.
Yeah, and it's probably, I don't know.
Imagine that.
Well, you had to do it. Yeah, I had no choice. And then we're going to reuse the stone to do the driveway at the schoolhouse now in the spring. So.
And I love in the background. I hope everybody gets a chance to see your video, Shan. It's classic. Shan is saying, well, we're going to make sure we replace that entire hedge. We're going to replant that hedge. I don't know if she was telling herself or the viewers or the people that might have been listening.
Well, Celine wanted as little damage as possible, of course. And if you, on the video, you can see they cut one little bit of hedge and then check to see if they can move, and then they cut one other little bit of hedge. So it will be replanted, and we appreciate the neighbors who allowed us to dump that stone in the field to make the road wider, and the neighbors on the other side, we had to cut a little tree. I wasn't hands-on here, but it was. Dennis just did a terrific job organizing this whole thing.
It becomes, I might say that it becomes a real spectacle, because you don't move buildings very often anymore. When the Plattsburgh Air Force Base was built in the early 50s, they moved a lot of buildings. And there was a gentleman whose name I won't mention here, who made a pretty good living moving lots and lots of those buildings.
The sad part about it is the closest guy around now is Watertown, Messina.
Yeah.
And when they come, it's full crew. Everything's hydraulic. It's very expensive, and they move. They'll move they can move anything today. They can move a 6, 8, 10-story building. It can be done. It's just that around here, there's nobody. I mean, the last time I saw anybody move a building was an old barn, and the guy moved it down the military turnpike with a team of horses.
I was there.
I'm sure you
We have the whole thing on video. I was riding in the truck. I was there when they jacked it.
a
And
personal friend of mine, and we had a long chat about that. And
George is a good guy, and
Great guy.
old Zeffie Newell owned that property, and those are stories that will bear to be told another day, and they're wonderful stories. But yes,
Once the move, well, even before the move started, too, we had our Ed Garrow was the mover, and we had New York State Electric and Gas, we had Time Warner Cable, we had Champlain Telephone. They all came ahead of time, looked at the situation, did the measuring, and they all had people on the job that day. I think there were 22 NYSEG crossings that we had to negotiate, so you'll see on the video that, they push the wires up, let the schoolhouse come through, and we very, very much appreciate Champlain Telephone donating their services for that. Can't say enough about NYSEG and Time Warner Cable. Everybody was so helpful.
You don't just hook onto a building and go down the road. I mean, there were people walking backwards directing you, Dennis. You were in and out of that tractor. You must have gotten shape just from getting in and out of the tractor to decide where we are. Then when you go down the road and see all the trucks with the buckets up, this thing has been done months ago, and I'm saying, oh, please, don't snap that line when you're getting up there. There's a guy with a bucket, pushing up on the line.
We walked 6 miles once when we moved one house, and this one here is 2.5. But I have walked 6-7 miles along a house once before.
Yeah. So you're not doing 18 or 20 miles an hour.
No. Well, I hired Ed. Garrell the last 2 times because it works out better for me. I mean, he pins on. I just tell him what I want done, and he listens, and we get the job done.
And he gets the permits.
And permits, that's another thing right there, sure.
Well, it's just better for, I have to be on the ground to see what's going on. I can't be in the truck. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I stay on the outside, and everybody's paying attention, and it works out better that way. It's better for me to hire somebody that's got the truck. I have my own trucks, don't get me wrong, but it's better to hire somebody that's an operator, and let's go. Let's hitch on and go.
So that was Ed Garrow in the truck on the video, and that was you walking backwards.
That's correct.
For a long ways.
Oh.
So what else? Now, the hedge and the little tree, took about 6 pulls to get the chainsaw going. I saw that.
Yeah. And,
you think I don't notice those things.
And the power lines, everybody was confused. Not confused, but everybody was concerned. No, they're concerned about power lines. Anybody would be. I mean, you snap a power line, and everybody's got a power, and it's endless. But everybody did their part, and the state police did a good job, and we had to hire an escort besides them, which is something new that they came out with. But I think everybody worked well together, and they came together good. It just took some time to get the project done because of the ground conditions, and that's not, like I told you before, that's not the only thing I do.
I think if you see George again, say hello.
Sure.
They were really, really worried about permits. And they were scared to death. Melissa was scared to death, and that the troopers were going to give them a hard time, because here we are, it's just a little building, and with a team of horses, and it was fun going down the road. And the troopers came by and waved, and that made her feel a whole lot better.
Gordy, how about having Dennis give a little update on what's going on with the schoolhouse building right now?
Yeah, so how long did the process take? By the time you got it jacked up and started moving, how long did it take it to get it where it is now?
Well, the day that we hooked onto it, obviously it took us an hour and a half, if I remember right.
To hook on?
To hook on and, get it out of the hole that it was in, and just to be sure. We hooked onto it the night before, just to be sure that it would, everything was going to move and everything was going to have, we'd had the ground level, the clearance that we needed, especially on the ground, because you don't want to get hung up somewhere, like on a railroad siding or, and you got the bridge. But for the most part, and like I said, we started, I think, in March because the ground was soft, so we stopped, then we went back to it, and now it's steading to go on a slab. And with any luck at all, we actually today we cut the pipes that are coming through the cement slab for the water and sewer, in case they ever want to put water and sewer and power. We put all pipes in the cement slab for prior. If they want to do it, they're there instead of doing it later. And one day next week, I'd like to move it on the slab.
No kidding. So it's sitting out in the road now, right?
It's at a dead end. It's on a dead end at the end of the Bay Shore Road, and it's just waiting to go on the slab. But I want to find a day in the middle of the week where girls are available, and I want to move it a day that's fairly mild.
Will that be difficult?
No, that's that one. Well, that one there is you got to come in straight because we did this.
I would say you got to come in straight.
The slab is we did the slab 6-8 inches wider than the building all the way around, so they can put a row of blocks down. That's what I believe they're gonna put a row of blocks down to do this. So
One row?
one or two rows, probably 3 rows.
Well, what we'll see when we get it, you got looking at it, when the house is there, we can find out how many we need.
Because you need a crawl space, you need
Oh, yeah.
three,
Oh,
four,
yeah.
three, 4 rows of blocks will work. I just, the thing is not to put it back the way when we took it off, it wasn't the way of doing it, but maybe the funds weren't there to do it when they put it there. I don't know. I don't know exactly who put it there or how they put it there, but it just, it was very, very low to the ground, and it created a lot of agony.
You did well. You've got my hats off to you, Dennis. You're a very humble guy. But I watched that whole process. I was grinding it out with you, boy, when I was watching. That's tough.
I was told by the Loran boys that the schoolhouse was moved from Coopersville to there with 2 teams of horses and a couple of
I was
wagons.
going to ask that. 2 teams.
Horses
That's before the addition was put on.
and a hay wagon, 2 hay wagons, and then Felix Tatro supervising the job. And they brought the schoolhouse there for Mr. Porcat. That's what I was told. I didn't see that, but Lauren Boy said he saw the whole thing. He told me
really?
that. He told me that.
Yeah, but back then, Celine's house wasn't there. The road was, there's no power.
Those were
line.
simpler times. weren't they?
There's a house on Pratt Street that came down from Hemmingford with horses.
No kidding.
Yeah, so, a lot of things can be moved, and a lot of things were done with horses, and it's just the frick. If you plan it right, it'll work. It just takes time. And today, you can't make a move without a permit. We've tried that before.
Yeah.
I can add a little bit, I think, to the story.
Why don't you?
I will. The Celine tells us that the day the schoolhouse was moved, her late husband Larry, who was son of Mr. Paquette, who bought the schoolhouse, was taking his turn in a spotting tower in Champlain. It was World War II,
Oh, God.
and he was up there sky watching, and he saw the wagons moving the schoolhouse.
Isn't that amazing?
On the same day.
Never mind the airplanes.
That's impressive.
Isn't that something? But no photographs exist of that move that we found
If
yet.
they do, if anybody has photos of anything connected with that schoolhouse or other schoolhouses in Champlain, or other information about teachers or students, we really would appreciate the opportunity to make copies of those photos and to talk to the people who have memories. And I'll throw in my email address if someone wants to contact me. It's S for Suzanne, or Shan as I'm called, Moore, MOORE, at pressrepublican.com. And you can also reach me by phone at 569-4440.
The prefix is 518. If somebody might have moved out of the area and has a drawer full of those photographs, those drawers do exist and those photographs do exist if we can only inspire people to get them here. We're going to pause for a moment and continue this very, very interesting story.
I have an, okay.
Okay, we got Gloria Ashline here, and you've been waiting patiently. Tell me a little bit about your connection.
Well, my father attended that school, and it was maybe 1890, 92 when he went there, and he also would have to go down early to make sure that wood was brought into the school for the fire. But I don't think he did light it because he was probably only about 6 years old. I'm sure that they didn't have him do that at that time. And I had my brother and 2 older sisters that did attend it. That school, I have an article from the November 7th, 1929 North Countryman with the Cooperville locals, which mentions that the following pupils in District Number 9 have perfect attendance during October and November. And the students mentioned are Gerald Ashline, Clifford Forger, Ina Fosier, Amos Fosier, Norma Fosier, David Gelano, and Elaine Matot. And Nellie Wood was the teacher at that time.
Isn't that wonderful? Perfect attendance.
Right.
Oh,
And then
my.
I have some memories of the one-room schoolhouse from my two older sisters. They would walk to school each day with their brother, and their mother would sometimes send a can of Campbell's soup down. The teacher would then open it
Yes. and
heat it on the stove, but she always made sure to sample it to be sure that it wasn't too hot.
Isn't that
What were your, tell us the names of your sisters and your brother.
Gerald and Dorothy and Adeline. And
I love that soup story. That's great. Because teachers would often bring a whole big rasher or a bowl of soup with them or a pan of soup with them in the morning. So they just brought a can of soup and opened it. All right.
right. And then my sister Adeline did mention that they would play games. And when there was snow on the ground, they would make a big circle out in the lawn. And then a line would be drawn down the center of the circle. And they would have to run, the girls would have to run from one end to the other. And if they didn't make it to the other end, then they were automatically out of the game. And then until the last one did win was the winner. And they said that they did play tug of war. That was a prominent game at that time. And they did mention that on their way to school, as Eddie said, they would meet up with Ken Lord, who was riding his horse, to school.
I love it. What a story.
And when they got to school, Ken would get off and he would direct the horse around, and the horse would go back, and they would ride to school, walk to school with him. Yeah.
That's great.
And my sister Adeline attended it only 1 year, and before they were transferred to the school in Champlain. And she and my sister Dorothy were the first ones to graduate from the new school, because in the meantime, the school that was next to Parsons had burned, and they built the new school, and so they were the first class to graduate in 1942.
1942. I love
I
it.
have a picture here of the school. Maybe I should take this out, might be easier for you. This is
Just hold it up for Calvin here.
and it is in front of the District 9, number 9 school, but I don't know who the children are.
And you don't even know what year it was, might have been taken, Gloria?
No.
Isn't that wonderful? Somebody watching this is going to say, that's my mother. That's my
That's what we're
grandmother.
hoping. That's what we're hoping.
And if they do, I hope you paid attention when Shan mentioned her email address. Everybody's got email just about
And
now.
this is another one.
Okay, here we go. And if you recognize any of these, if you have any pictures, if you have other anecdotes, I mean, this is a project, even though it's been a long time coming, it's just barely getting started, for we hope what the future will be. So if you have any information at all, it's smore, M-O-O-R-E, at pressrepublican.com. Love to hear from you. What else?
And I have a picture of Nellie Wood.
Oh, my goodness,
Started
look at
teaching in
this.
1897
Oh, isn't that great? Where did you get that picture?
from shopping around and looking around. And she was teaching school there at,
Isn't that amazing?
Very good teacher.
I love that picture. Sometimes you have to be a good scrounger, don't you?
Exactly. Well, these are other schools that she taught at as well. I mean, she did teach at Moores and Altona, and I think Shazy, as well as Cooperville. Then when they left, when the school was closed in 1931, she did teach at Perry's Mills School. And Miss Fosier was teaching, Mrs. Fosier was teaching at the Champlain School.
It's important for us to pay special tribute to these teachers, because I know what kind of a kid I was like, and I know what they had to put up with in small towns. But my teachers had as big an influence on me as my own parents did. And I can remember a lady whose name was Agnes Labarge, who put up with me and encouraged me to read. More important than anything else in the world. Read, read, read. Write a book report on every book you read. Put it in this little packet on the wall next to your seat. And, you just love those memories, don't you?
Certainly do. And as Shan was saying, that I hope that anyone that has any pictures at all will come forward, so that would be, a great help to us in the future, and well, for our books and whatever we can try to compile to make it interesting.
That's
And we're
wonderful.
looking forward to the project.
Thanks so much for
You're
talking
very
with us.
welcome.
You've also been waiting patiently, Kathy Folger. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Now, what's your connection with the school?
My father had 6 siblings that went,
Wow.
and the oldest one was Irvin Folger, and he ended up by being a fireman for the railroad. And the next one was Abram Folger, and there was Ina Folger LaValle, and there was Abram Folger, Norma Folger Coyle, and my father did not attend the schoolhouse because he was born in 1930 and it had closed in 1931. So he had to go to the Champlain School District. And I did meet Aunt Lily in my lifetime when I was a little girl. I think I was about 7 or 8 years old. And I remember her, she was like in her 80s. And she was, to me, she was tiny and petite. And she was very sweet, and she always wore her hair in the school, how bun style, that they
Oh,
wore
sure.
back then. And she always
Boy, I
continued.
remember those hairdos.
Yeah, and she always wore in that little bun style.
Oh, isn't that great?
And that's all I remember of her. And
You don't remember any stories that they might have told about the schoolhouse itself?
no,
You were quite
because
small.
at the time, I wasn't really aware of it, so unfortunately I could have gotten a lot of information if I had known about it at that time, because my Aunt Ina lived in Cooperville for years and years, and she would have been a wonderful resource person to have, and she just passed away about a year ago, and I was hoping to get down to Elmira and be able to interview her, and it just didn't work in our favor.
But aren't you excited to become a part of it all right now?
Yes, I am. I think it's a wonderful thing, and we really appreciate Eddie Bayshore getting us all on board and, getting this project on forward.
I think it's absolutely wonderful. I thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Shan, you had a few notes that you wanted to share with us.
Oh, I do. The Charles Hancock diaries are so fascinating. They reveal so much about the past here. So I went through and I found all the references to the schoolhouse. And the first one that I find is January 15th, 1880. A Belair girl he writes, she took sick at the schoolhouse and they had to go after her. So certainly they weren't picking up the phone and saying, some little boy like Eddie must have had to run to Belair's house and say the kid was sick. So it looks like there were summer and winter terms, because we've got May 3rd, 1880 is when school commenced for the summer, and Mrs. Ladd was a teacher then. And then in summer 1880 there was a diphtheria epidemic, and the schoolhouse must have seemed a lot bigger when that was over, because Hancock talks of several children dying. School meeting night was October 12th, 1880. November 18th that year is when winter school started with Mrs. Ladd as the teacher. November 23rd was the big uproar when Mrs. Ladd got sick and quit, and one of the gentlemen, it seems, wanted to get somebody back who they didn't really like as a teacher. Jason Chapman had the contract to get the wood for the schoolhouse in the winter of 1880, and he bought it from someone named Pat Delante. And then this entry, November 29th, says our school was to commence this morning. Miss Barber from Scioto was to take the place of Mrs. Whitney Ladd, but it did not commence. So I don't know, maybe the roads were bad and Miss Barber couldn't make it. Here's an interesting entry. Mr. Hancock took his wife Addie out they had a night on the town February 3rd, 1881. They went to a spelling bee.
Wow.
That took place, yeah. Well, it was. It took place at the Stone School House, which would be, I think, on the corner of Leggett Road and 9B,
Absolutely.
which I think locals call Kings Bay College.
Yep.
That school's totally gone now. Hancock writes, Addie and myself went up, and Lily Pike spelt down the school. It was nice.
Isn't that?
And Lily Pike was a student. It was District 9 against that other district.
I love it.
District 9 had some smart kids, I guess. So the Hancock's daughter Lottie was born June 30th, 1881. She'd start school when she was 7. He makes a note of that. He makes a note when little Bob Stetson starts school on January 9th, 1882. He mentions there was a funeral at the Stone School in 1882 for Mrs. Jason Chapman, who, I just used his name a second ago, didn't I? Oh, the man who had the contract for the wood. But I thought that was interesting that a funeral would be in a schoolhouse. Then Addison Yale started school, but in Champlain in 1882. August 19th, 1882, it is the last day of school in our district. D-R-I-S-T-R-I-C-K.
Okay.
And they had a picnic at Point O Fair. So they had some fun back then.
So he didn't win the spelling bee, is that what you're telling me?
I guess not. No, yeah, that's the truth. There was the first school election in Coopersville, he writes, in 1890. There were only 103 votes, and Miss Alice Kinsley won over Hiram M. Mott. So we were very progressive. We had a woman in charge.
So much for that glass ceiling, right?
That's right. So that concludes the entries here. Yes, sir.
Am I wrong, or did I dream this up? Is there a time capsule?
Right, we were talking about that a little
We want to find that time capsule. She says people are going to go after it this spring.
Yep, the Clinton County.
We'll get every psychic we know, and we'll get every divining rod, and everybody out there, see if we can dig that time capsule up at the old spot.
The glass bottle.
It's in a glass bottle. That'll be great. Shannon, I want to ask you a couple of questions before we end up here today. What is your vision for the next 2 years?
Well, first we need the schoolhouse to be on the foundation.
After that?
In the spring, we plan to bring in electricity. We're hoping by next summer to have some kind of exhibit up. We will need to do some fundraising to bring in some cash for improvements and to set up exhibits. We expect this will be a by appointment kind of history center where schools can bring children for tours, and then we'll have open house for different exhibits.
Are you going to try to set up part of it as an old schoolhouse inside?
Yep.
Restore a portion of it?
Fortunately, with Eddie's desks and the ink bottles, we've got a good start, and also we've had another old desk donated to us.
We have.
Yep. So yes, if anybody has something that would fit the time period of 1880 to 1930, we'd be glad to have it.
Got to find a blackboard.
Oh, we need a blackboard. Yep. Yep.
Goodness
And
knows where they are.
fortunately, Eddie has an outhouse he can give to
Eddie's
us.
got an outhouse.
We're going to move that too.
After the wonderful stories that were told off camera, we might need one of those. I want to take just a moment, as we only have a couple of minutes left. This is something we could talk about on and on and on and on and on. It's such a vital part of who we are now, the school systems and how they developed over the North Country, the railroads, the proximity to the Canadian border, and the name changes from Corbeau to the present name, and whether it's Coopersville or Cooperville, and all these things are fun to get into. You people have just whetted my appetite. And I'm excited by the fact that there are so many energetic people like you. Shan, if somebody else wants to get involved with your group, can they contact you?
Oh, they sure can. Yes.
S. Moore at Plattsburgh.com.
No. As more at PressRepublican.com.
PressRepublican.com. Okay, I'm sorry. PressRepublican.com. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Beverly. You talked so well on camera over there in the corner. Now that we know all these stories about you, you better be good to me.
I'm sure we're leaving out some people who have
Of
been
course.
helpful. So we hope they know that they're very much appreciated for everything they've done. And if it weren't for Ed and Bev, this wouldn't be happening at all. So we
Thank you both
we love them.
for getting involved in the project, for your wonderful stories on and off the camera, for allowing us to break right into your kitchen here on the shores of Lake Champlain in Coopersville for a short time today on the 14th of January, 2011. It's been a ball for me. Dennis?
Yep.
Just keep jacking those buildings up there with
Well
you.
done.
Thanks again to everybody. Have a wonderful day. And who knows where we're going to be next time.